This video is going to cover the Media Queries 2 demo for Web Design 2. Once in Blackboard, go under Demos and scroll down until you see Responsive Web Media Queries Part 2. You'll see a zip file there. Go ahead and right click and save that to your Demos folder in Web Design 2. And then go inside of your Web 2 folder, inside of Demos, and you'll see the responsive demo 2, so unzip that. And you can get rid of the zip file. And go ahead and open up the files in whatever code editor you like. I'm going to be using Atom, so I am going to open Atom, and I am just going to toss this in here. Hit Not Now for that, and then I'm going to close all these other tabs because I don't need them open. If you're using Dreamweaver, then go ahead and open up Dreamweaver, and then you should see your folders and files in your Web 2 Files panel. The other thing that I'm going to do is open up this index file inside of a web browser. In this case, I am going to use Chrome. Hopefully this looks really similar to the demo that we worked on last week, because it is very similar, just a few different changes, and we're going to look at what those are now. So first, make this bigger. I'm going to open up the index, and then I'll also go ahead and open up the CSS. And in the index, in Atom, I'm going to go to View, and then toggle soft wrap, just that way I can see all of my text. So a few things that are different: we now have a main tag, and the main tag goes around all of the content until here, and then we have an aside. The aside is this information down here. So it's just kind of some extra information. Again, an aside is something that you can remove from your web page and the main content still makes sense. So the main, you can only have once per page, and that is like the meat and potatoes of your website. Like, that's the main reason why someone is there. Okay, so we have most of the main styles done for us. A few things that I am going to switch up and just kind of double check. Okay, so in the body, you're going to see that font size is 100%. Basically, font size at 100%, that is the equivalent to 1em, 16 pixels, and 12 points. So anything that changes off of that, off of 100%, will be based off of those font sizes. Now, right now, a width of 80% and margin of 10% isn't always going to keep my body, which is the white background, centered. You can see there's more space on the left than there is on the right. So with block level elements, whenever we have a width, we can tell our left and right value of margin to be auto, and that is going to center the block level element, which is what body is. I do want to add a max width on here because I do not want this growing past a certain point. We use max width whenever we talked about images, but you can use it for anything. And in this case, I don't want my design to continue growing with a really large screen. I want to stop at one point. And that's good design as well. You can see it kind of centered a little bit there, because no one wants this to go the whole way across the page, right? We don't want to have to actually turn our head when we read. And in case you missed it, just now I had saved this, so I hit Command or Control S, and then I came in here and hit refresh. Okay, so we also have an image, and we want the image to stop growing at a certain point because we can see it's a little bit blurry and pixelated right now. So in the image, let's go in and tell the image to have a max width. And in this case, you would have to go in and find what the max width is in Photoshop. In this case, we want to stop growing at 640. And if you have multiple images, then you should be using classes or IDs. In this case, I just have one, so we can just use the image tag. Okay, so I'm going to save, then come in here and refresh, and it stops growing. All right, the next thing that I want to do, and this is the first thing that's new for this lecture, is I don't want to see this on a small screen. I don't want to see the aside. The reason being is if it's really not that important, and let's just pretend to have a lot more information, I don't really need to see some other books that I can read other than The Wizard of Oz. So I'm actually going to hide them. So just to remind you, in the index page, it's an aside tag. Okay, it's an aside. So I am going to style the aside. Right, it already has a border on the left, we can see that. But what I'm going to do right now, I've already styled it to see how it will look, but now I'm just going to hide it. Oops. And I'm going to put in a comment that says hides the aside in mobile view. So I'm going to save this, come back and refresh. Bye bye aside. It's not there anymore, and it's all because I told it display none. Later in the media query, we will tell it to show up, but for right now, we don't need to be here. Okay, so the next thing that I want to do is go ahead and get those columns back in, and this is kind of review from the last lecture, but we'll do it again just because it is kind of relatively new. All right, so again, I have a div with a class called column, and I have another div with a class called column. I could have called these anything that I wanted. Okay, it didn't matter, but in this case, I want them to look exactly the same, so I gave them the same class name. The reason they're divs and not section or article is because there's no heading in here. Right? If there were a heading, then it would need to be a section or an article, but if there's no section or article, it has to be a div. Okay, so I'm going to jump over to my styles, and I'm hitting enter just so it's easier for you guys to see it while coding. All right, so I'm going to put in my media query, so at media screen and min width, and we'll do a jump to 768. So 768 will be our first breakpoint. And again, you can put in a comment saying that you're closing the 768 media query, and word that however it makes sense to you. Okay, so just to show you, because I had mentioned this before, I'm going to adjust the body font size. So I'm going to tell it to now be 120%. So the nice thing about this is that now it is going to increase all font sizes by 20%. And we're doing this because we now have room to increase it. So not only is it going to change, well, body is kind of everything, but we set a precedent up here and said, everything inside the body just be set off of this 100%. And now we're saying we'll take everything and increase its size. Okay, so let's save that and then come in and refresh and go to our larger screen. And then our font gets a little bit larger. Okay, not a lot, but a little bit, just enough so we can see it a little bit better. Okay, and then the review from last week, we want to style columns. And columns are classes, so they need a dot in front of them. And let me hit enter a few times so you can see it a little bit easier. Okay, so I am going to put a width of 45%. So I have two things going side by side, so I can't make them more than 50%. So I'm going to do 45% so that way I have some room to kind of add some spacing. All right, so if you want things to go side by side, you have to have a width, and you also have to have float left. And then I'm also going to give it margin on the right, just to kind of add a gutter between those columns. Okay, so I'm going to save and then refresh. Boom, we've got our columns. All right, now we have a display problem here. Now I kind of mentioned this in the last lecture, the last demo, but we had an H6 that we could tell it to clear both and that would fix that problem. But in this case, we don't have that. So here's what's happening. As soon as you put floats on something, the parent element, which in this case is main or body, it stops working. It doesn't know to continue to encompass the two things that are floating. And just to be clear, the parent-child relationship here is that these two columns are inside of this white box, or they're supposed to be inside this white box. So that means this is the parent, and the two things inside of it are the children. So, and that's not me making this up. Like this is how we actually talk about nested tags in code. All right, so what I need to do is use a CSS. It's kind of like a hack, actually, but a piece of CSS code referred to as Clearfix. And honestly, you can just do a Google search for CSS Clearfix. And the one I like to use a lot is this. CSStricks.com is a great resource for just explaining CSS code in general. And not just CSS, it kind of goes beyond that too, but that's what I use it for. All right, so just this piece of code right here, that's all I need. I'm going to copy it. And then I am going to come down here, and I'm actually just going to paste it above my media query, so that way it will always take effect, and save this. And look, the only part you really need to even understand is that it's looking for a class called group. All right, well, I need to put this group on the thing that isn't working. What isn't working anymore? This white box, and that's body. So I'm going to go to my index page, scroll up to the top, and I'm going to put a class called group on it. And bam, there it is. It's working. Wonderful. Exactly what we wanted to have happen. All right, let's go for an even wider screen, So let's go back to our CSS. And I'm going to add in another media query. So at media, screen, and min width. And this time I'm going to do 960. And then the curly braces. And again, I will say closes the 960 media query. Again, these comments are for you, so you comment it however it makes sense to you, but you should have comments in there. All right, let's jump up that body font size again. And this isn't something you have to do. I'm just trying to show you that it works if you wanted to use it. All right, so I'm making that font size increase 10% more than what it was in the earlier media query. Okay, so what I want to have happen in this wider view is that I want to still have the two columns here, but then I want to take it a step further, and I want to make it so that all of this is a column and that aside comes up here almost like its own column. So the first thing that I have to do is I have to tell the main tag to be a column. Right? I have to tell the main tag to be its own thing and tell it to go side by side. Right, so main, which we already have in the HTML, so I have to give it a width. So anything you want to go side by side, you have to give it a width. So I'm just going to say 75% because it needs to be the larger thing, and then I'll tell it float left. All right, float left. So we're going to, in the next step, show the aside, and we need to have room for the aside. So 75%, what's left of 100, 25%. Right, and again, I might make it a little bit smaller so that way I have room for margin and padding if I need it. So I'm going to style aside. Well, the aside isn't showing right now, so the first thing I need to do is tell it display block to show the aside from when we hit it earlier. All right, so now it's showing, and I need to give it a width, so I'm just going to say 20%, so that way I have that room for margin if I want to use it. And then I need to tell it to float left to make it go side by side. And then I'm going to say margin, I want some space on it, and I'm going to put space on the left-hand side because that is where the main tag is. So I'm going to save this and then refresh, and I need to move this over a little bit, refresh, and then make my screen bigger. And what did I do wrong? Min width. Whoops. That's what I did wrong. Okay, so I put the parenthesis in the wrong spot. There we go. So the reason that I looked there first for troubleshooting, and it's kind of, I know it's funny, but I kind of like it whenever I just code through this really quickly and I end up making a mistake, because now I can explain to you why I looked right there first. So I double checked first to make sure I saved it, and then I double checked to make sure I refreshed it, and then whenever it wasn't showing, I saw that I had spelled everything correctly and I have the right punctuation. So then I was like, well, is my media query even working? Because main wasn't getting smaller. Main wasn't getting smaller. So I had to come up here and look at my media query. I'm not saying that's the only thing that was wrong, but that was one big thing. So let's refresh and make it larger. And there we go. All right, so here's my side, and I know it's only up here, but it actually goes the entire length. Like, it actually is taking up this entire area here. So here's a great reason to use the inspect part. So I'm going to right click and go to inspect. I'm going to close this little thing because I don't need it. And I'm going to put my mouse over main. So this is what is really helpful, I think. So the part that's in blue, that's showing you where main is right now. And I click on main, and look, it's saying it's 75%. Well, if I uncheck 75%, if you don't tell it to be a shorter width, then it's going to take up that entire space. All right, so you have to do that. It was originally told to be 100%, but in the media query, which is activated because we're at that width, it's saying, no, I want you to be 75% now. Okay, and then, so there's main. You've got your two columns in there, so you can see the space they're taking up. So there's main, and then here's a side. The orange part is the margin. The green is any padding, and that's coming from the bullets right now. So here's your aside. If we didn't have the display block on it, then it wouldn't show up. The width, again, if we took the width off of it, because it's a block level element, it thinks it should be 100% wide. We got to tell it not to be, so we put the width of 20%. Okay, and then the other thing with the clear fix, I know we kind of did that one quickly. I'll be honest with you, this isn't something you have to do a lot because you're usually going to have something down here that's going to be told clear both in CSS, and that's going to fix it. But I did want to show you how you can solve it if you don't have that issue, or if you don't have that item, that element, whatever it happens to be, that is going to be told to clear both. You're probably going to need to use it in your assignment, so that's why I wanted to bring it up to you. But that is it for the lecture, and as always, if you guys have any questions, please do not hesitate to ask.